Hi, and thanks for watching our video on the political frame, brought to you by Aaron, Mike, and Quinn. I wanted to have you take a couple of minutes and grab a scratch piece of paper or something on your computer, and I want you to write down 5 words you think of when you hear politics. This image is what comes to mind when I hear the word politics. Divisiveness, shouting, anger, taking sides, manipulation. Politics, as defined by the political frame, is the realistic process of making decisions and allocating resource in a context of scarcity and divergent interests. If you think about your school district or even your school building or perhaps your department or even your classroom, this definition of politics really resonates. Schools are not places where everybody can have an unlimited budget and unlimited time and unlimited access to everything that they need to further their particular interests. So whether you're dealing with you're a principal and dealing with teachers, or you're a central office dealing with different buildings, there will always be some sort of process of decision making in order to get people the most that you can give them in order to further their interests. So, as a political manager, as we'll talk about later, you need to understand the political frame in order to think through decisions this way. There's 3 sections to this particular frame. Power, conflict, and coalition I will be talking about first. Then Quinn will be talking about the manager as politician. And finally, Mike will wrap it up with organizations as political arenas and political agents. When you are trying to understand a political frame, there are 5 political propositions to consider. The first is that organizations are coalitions. So they are groups of people made up of groups of people who are working toward a particular goal. These coalition members have enduring differences. So there are different groups of people. I think about my high school, that we're all working towards the goal of getting these students to graduate, but the English department might have a certain slant on something. Parents might have a different slant on it. The high school coaches and students would have a different slant on things. So there are these enduring differences that exist. There are scarce resources that must be allocated. There is not enough time, money, human capital to go around. So there are decisions that must be made. Because we have these different competing interests and scarce resources, you can tell that it's ripe for conflict, for power over these things. So the goals and decisions that ultimately result come from bargaining and negotiation. So understanding how to get what it is that you need is part of this political frame. One idea that they focus a lot on are organizations as coalitions. So this combining of different groups of people with different interests. There's one big coalition, but a lot of times there are a lot of sub-coalitions. Every different coalition or different group has a different strength, is made up of different people, and it's how they intersect in your particular organization that can cause different political dynamics. Within all of these organizations, you have to understand who is in control and who can make the wheel turn. As you notice, there's a central actor in this picture that makes all the other wheels spin, but if one of the other wheels stops, the whole thing stops. If one of the wheels starts in motion, it might take more effort from the outside, but it can get a residual effect for everybody else. These interconnected pieces, coalitions, are different in different organizations. So it's important to understand how these things work. One question to ask yourself when you're examining that model or that decision that you just went through is who has the power. The authors describe 2 different groups, authorities and partisans. Authorities are defined as people who are in some sort of positional role, who have some sort of inherent ability to make decisions. Partisans are people who have influence over the authorities and also are affected by the people in the authority position that are creating that particular policy, that they will be influenced by them as well. So there's sort of a reciprocal relationship between authorities and partisans. Both of those groups of people draw on different sources of power depending on the individual and their position in the organization. I'll go through a couple of these. I think some of them you're already familiar with. One that you're probably already familiar with is just your position. If you're the superintendent, you may have more power than a classroom teacher feels like he or she has. If you are in control of rewards, it might be pay, it might be an extra day vacation. Those sorts of rewards might be you get the ultimate decision that you wanted. Coercive power, where you're trying to coerce someone into doing something. So persuasion it plays a role there too. If you're seen as very much an expert, you wield a certain amount of power, especially it seems as if you come in from outside the organization. That is tied to reputation. If you have a reputation for getting things done or getting your way or your ability to get people on board, reputation kind of fits in with that. Personal power and referent power kind of overlap a little bit in that it's about how you use your reputation or your personality traits in order to command power, respect, to influence others. Alliance and networks, how you can build that. We talk a lot about building relationships and building a group around you in order to share your common vision. Access and control of agenda is a big one, I think, to think about. Whoever controls the agenda and sets the tone often controls the process and ultimately what the final decision is. When I was thinking of my particular example of a recent curriculum adoption, people were really wanting to be in control of the process because they felt like that would ultimately determine the final decision. That was really strongly apparent in this last curriculum review we had. And then you have framing. Which lens are you going to look at the situation through? And that again goes with controlling the message and the agenda. Some techniques that you can use in order to influence others that the author describes are reciprocation. So you do something for me, I'll do something for you. Social proof. Look, all these other people are doing it. You should too. Authority. You're going to do it or you're going to get fired. Commitment and consistency. Trying to draw out their participation by being committed to your stated vision and consistently coming back around to it, not letting it fall off the plate and always following through. Just because people like you or because scarcity. If you don't use this might be going away. You don't want it to go away. You really like it. You need to do it. That sort of thing. As you can see in this picture, sometimes conflict is a part of organizations. When you have people lobbying for scarce resources, there will be conflict between different groups. As a manager, it's your job to make sure that you don't go into this sort of a meeting where conflict devolves into chaos. As a leader, conflict can be productive. You can get change and innovation, new ideas. You don't have just a stagnant, yes, everything is great, we're going to keep doing the same things we've always done. The key is that you need strategies and tactics to allow that conflict to become productive and result in change. Not always trying to resolve every conflict, not thinking that everybody will be on the same page 100% of the time. But to be able to be that positive leader that can see the good in conflict and move the organization forward.
Okay, so this is Quinn here, and I did chapter 10 of Bowman and Deal, which is the manager as a politician. And the first thing I wanted to talk about, or I guess put on this first slide, was that self-interest from powerful execs can bring down huge corporations, which then begs the question, should politics be removed from management? And according to Bowman and Deal, this is unrealistic because enduring differences lead to multiple interpretations no matter what this happens. Scarce resources trigger contests, and interdependence means that people cannot ignore one another. Um, and then I pulled this quote from Kotter in 1985, which states that organizational excellence demands a sophisticated type of social skill, a leadership skill that can mobilize people and accomplish important tasks despite dozens of obstacles, a skill that can pull people together for meaningful purposes despite the thousands of forces that push apart, a skill that can keep our corporations and public institutions from descending into mediocrity characterized by bureaucratic infighting, parochial politics, and vicious power struggles. So on the next slide, these are the 4 skills that Bowman and Deal think are important for us to know as politicians, managers as politicians. And they are agenda setting, mapping the political terrain, networking and building coalitions, and finally, bargaining and negotiations. So, first, we go into agenda setting. Structurally, this is an outline where we outline a goal and a schedule of activities, but politically, this is a statement of interests and a scenario for getting the goods. Um, then they talk about an agenda for change, which is a vision balancing the long term interests of key parties, so all of your key stakeholders, for example. And then it's also a strategy for achieving the vision while recognizing competing internal and external forces. So they ask us, and actually I pulled these two things because I thought they were really important. And because Bowman and Deal tell us to get to know stakeholders to develop an agenda rooted in their needs and concerns. And that just reminds me of being a political manager in schools. We need to make sure that all of our stakeholders are kept in our minds as we develop these agendas. So everyone, students, teachers, staff of all kinds, community members, and even upper management. And then they talk about this idea of sensitivity. So knowing how others think and what they care about, so your agenda responds to their concerns. And they talk about how important that is for a political manager. Okay, the next part is mapping the political terrain, so this kind of entails four pieces here: determining channels of informal communication, identifying principal agents of political influence, analyzing possibilities for mobilizing internal and external players, and finally, anticipating counter strategies that others are likely to employ. And so one of the suggestions from Bowman and Deal is to make a political map, like the one you see below, which I pulled straight from the book, pages 212 to 213. And so what you do is you're diagramming your players, so who's in the game. You're looking at how much power they have, what power will they exercise, and then finally, what are their interests? So how badly do they want whatever it is you're aiming for to really happen? And so on the left, you see they gave this example of these techies. I don't know, I can't really remember who they were, but where they thought the players sort of lined up, but then on the right, it's where they were in actuality. And so that was really important because I think that they ran into some problems because they thought people were going to be on their side or had more power or less power, and it turns out it was not as they anticipated. So they suggest doing this as a political manager. Next, we're looking at networking and building coalitions. So there's four parts to this: identifying relevant relationships, figure out which players need to influence, assess who might resist, why would they resist, and how strongly. So determine where the leadership challenges will be. Develop wherever possible links with potential opponents to facilitate communication, education, or negotiation. So keep your enemies close. If step 3 fails, carefully select and implement either more subtle or more forceful methods. Save your potent weapons until you really need them, but have a plan B in case plan A falls short. So in other words, I guess they also talked about, so what's sort of your line of support here? Where do you go first? And so if you look on the left, you look at how excited she is for you. Get your boss on your team, make sure that they're understanding what you're trying to get done and that you've got their support. Then you go out and you find cheerleaders. Who are those people that you know are going to support your agenda? And then really get them on board. By next, you'll see this very happy horse who this is called horse trading. So when you have your cheerleaders, it's essentially when you promise rewards by the cheerleaders then giving you resources and support. So that's horse trading, promising rewards to your cheerleaders for their support and resources. And then finally, the last thing you do is that once you have this foundational group who's backing you, you go into this securing blessings phase where the upper management actually then would be on your side, and especially if they see the support you've already built. This is just a funny cartoon explaining horse trading. So the guy on the left is the political manager trying to get people on board with him. Okay, the third part is bargaining and negotiation, which is the difference between creating value and claiming value. So value creators believe that successful negotiators must be inventive and cooperative and searching for a win-win. And value claimers see win-win as naively optimistic. For them, bargaining is very difficult to do, and you just win as much as you can. There's not really the option of, everybody going away happy. Principled bargaining, which is on page 216, talks about separate people from the problem, focus on interests, not positions, invent options for mutual gain instead of locking in on the first alternative that comes to mind, and insisting on objective criteria, standards of fairness for both substance and procedures. And then I ask you this question related to number one: what are strategies you use to focus on the task at hand? Or in other words, how do you separate people from the problem when you are bargaining? I'll let you think about that. Please pause if you need to. Okay, and the last piece for chapter 10 here talked about morality and politics. And I liked this quote that said, the line between positive and negative politics is a tightrope we have to walk. So for the people who are against you, these adversary, I never know how to say that word. Anyway, people against you or will question you. First, you're going to tell them your vision, state your best understanding of their position, and identify your contribution to the problem, and finally telling them what you plan to do without making demands. And so again, these were really, for me, I think I'm going to keep these around because I think whenever I get into a sticky situation, I think if I ask myself these questions, I will know what is right or wrong or good or bad. And so I would recommend for you to keep these questions handy as well, especially when you're kind of sitting with a tough decision in front of you. So are you following rules that are mutually understood and accepted? Are you comfortable discussing and defending your choices? Would you want to be on the receiving end of your actions? Would the world be better or worse if everyone acted as you did? And are there alternatives you could consider that rest on firmer ethical ground? So, good questions to keep in mind. That is the end of chapter 10, and you will now go into Mike's presentation on chapter 11, I believe. Okay, thank you. Quinn is